The leader of the opposition has said recently that the time has come for what he calls cutbacks in the level of spending in education and in health. What's your position on that?
We are a party which was founded on social justice, and our economic and social policy has always looked to the social services to ensure that every single Barbadian had an equal share of the pie. So if you're going to speak about cutting back, you're speaking about privatization. And that means then that only the Barbadians who can afford to have their garbage picked up will have it picked up. Only the Barbadians who can afford for a bed in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital will be able to stay as long as they can to get better. It means that only the Barbadians who can pay to be educated will be educated. And I see where they're going with that argument, but I wish my colleague here to continue.
No, but in fact, I think what the Leader of the Opposition and his colleagues need to do is to articulate specific policies so that the Barbadians here and in Barbados can understand what they're suggesting. Now, Irene mentioned garbage. Now, one member of the opposition is on record from time to time is saying that in fact that she believes that Barbadians will pay for the collection of garbage and that there's no reason why sanitation should not be privatized. They really need to come out into the public domain and articulate exactly what they're speaking about so that Barbadians here and abroad can see what exactly they're proposing instead of these vague
inferences,
suggestions that we're going to cut back education, cut back health, you know, and put fiscal incentives in place. They have failed in that regard in terms of giving us specifics so that we can analyze.
But we can analyze, because if you talk about fiscal incentives, you can only have fiscal incentives if you work. If you do not work, how am I supposed to give you fiscal incentives if you have to pay for your health care?
Yeah.
What are you saying to Barbadians here in Brooklyn and throughout New York? I know they're asking you, are you ready for this upcoming election? Can you win this upcoming election?
And we will tell them that we will win this upcoming election.
And they're going to ask you, how do you know that, or why are you saying that to them? Based on what?
Based on the fact that we have outlined our policies and our proposals to Barbadians. We have worked with the Barbadian public with our fiscal strategy. We had a medium-term and a long-term strategy. We have kept them abreast of where we are economically. We've let them know which targets we've met, which targets we have not met, and we have held their hands along the way. And I think that Barbadians are generally known for their intelligence, and they think.
There's been some concern about the impact that the high cost is having on businesses, on manufacturing. And I believe that concern is carrying through this election season. What incentives are being offered by government that you can speak of to alleviate those concerns?
Well, look, if you look at the agriculture sector, for example, I mean, we have over the years, almost in every budget, we've given incentives to agriculture. In our last budget, as you know, we're heading in the direction of having a green economy. We're trying to encourage the hotel sector. We're trying to encourage manufacturers to do more in terms of green energy and put incentives in place. We don't have a lot of control, as you very well know, in terms of the cost of fossil fuels. But where we can make a difference in terms of green energy, where we can make a difference in terms of incentives, we have been doing. What our manufacturers, I think, need to do is to be bolder in terms of seeing that, in fact, that there's a horizon outside of Barbados. Mm-hmm. We have some of the best furniture manufacturers in the world. You look at some of our furniture, and you cannot believe that they're 50, 60 years old and still in outstanding condition. But yet you don't see it in New York when you sit down, or in the UK when you sit down, as much as you would like to. But there are people who will pay for the quality.
And you spoke about manufacturing, Sam, but I think you would realize that the diversification of our economy has lapsed. And the previous administration made no effort to do that. We are now offering incentives, especially in the last budget, to ensure that we diversify the economy of Barbados, because that is why we're in the position we're in today. We had one sector which we depended on, tourism. The bottom is falling out of tourism at present, and there is nothing else in Barbados for us to look to for foreign exchange. And this budget was specific in looking at areas where incentives could have been offered to young people who wish to study areas like mass communications, animation, new areas of an economic endeavor. You get 50% of your student revolving loan taken off if you study or you propose to do certain fields of endeavor, so that the economy then can start to move towards the diversification and the 21st and 22nd century economic platform that we always should have been moving towards.
Is this moving towards in the 21st and 22nd century tourism, or would tourism be considered moving back? You did mention tourism earlier, and I know Standard & Poor's, in their reasons for the downgrading of the Barbados economy, said one of their concerns was the tourist industry and the heavy dependence on tourism.
We have never stopped supporting tourism industry. The first thing this administration did, Sam, when we took office, was to give them what we call the Tourism Relief Fund. We injected $25 million into the tourism industry to shore up their businesses, to ensure that jobs were not lost in the industry. We've come again in this budget, and we've given them incentives again to enhance their plant. We cannot be responsible for the economic positioning of foreign-owned companies which would come to Barbados, purchase the businesses, and then lay off Barbadians. They have not sought to become part of our social partnership. The social partnership is the glue which held us together in the early 90s. It is holding us together now at the local level. But you will find that the foreign-owned companies seem not to have bought in to the social partnership concept, and that is a challenge that we're going to have to address.
And I think too, Sam, if you allow me, because I am a politician, so I do look at things politically. One of the failures of the last administration was not diversify our tourism plan enough. We depended on Canada and the UK, predominantly, and a bit of the US. So that when those markets saw problems, automatically we then saw significant problems. At a time when fiscally we were unable to give as much to marketing of Barbados as we could have, we nevertheless gave $100 million, I believe, to tourism and said, look, not only do we still need you to look at our traditional markets, but we must look outside of our traditional markets. So we went into Brazil, went into Panama, went into Costa Rica. You know, we are expanding our markets as much as possible. Even in Europe, in Sweden, we've done some additional work in Sweden. In Germany, we're doing some additional work. So we are trying to expand our reach so that if we have problems in the future, we have a wider basket that we can depend on.
We know that there was some concern about disagreements within the Democratic Labour Party, as there were some disagreements within the Barbados Labour Party some years ago. Are there going to be any changes between now and elections? We saw changes some years ago in the Barbados Labour Party. Are there likely to be any changes in the Democratic Labour Party?
I think, Sam, you need to speak to the Prime Minister of Barbados, but I will say...
How did I know you were going to tell me that?
I will say, though, I don't envisage, I'd be very surprised if there are any changes. We have a team, like any family, from time to time you might disagree. But we do agree on one thing, which is that we are still the best party to govern Barbados for the foreseeable future. And in that regard, we will work and we will do what is required to ensure that we maintain the governance of Barbados.
Irene?
There have never been any public disagreements in our party in this term of our administration. The gentleman requested a meeting, and that was it. And it was blown up out of proportion into this major issue of disagreements, while you have an opposition leader who at every turn disparages his deputy to the point where he doesn't give her a chance to, he gives her the budget reply, but then turns around and disparages the report, because in the Senate where I sit, not one member of the opposition supported the deputy leader of the opposition's presentation in the lower house. not one. Now, that is not synergy.
Senator Garner
Yes.
and Attorney General Brathwaite, we want to thank you for being my guest here on Brooklyn 45. And now we go to Gina Spencer, who's going to be chatting with Attorney Natasha Riley.